So I have a lot of devices. You may think that I'm only interested in smartphones because, well, most of my videos are actually focused on smartphones. But as a matter of fact, you only see about 5% of all the devices and what I'm really interested in. So long story short, everything from computers, cameras, hardware components, storage units, servers, game development, etc. interests me a lot. And out of all my tech collection, which I'll probably show you one day, I have a few devices that I use basically every single day. And one of those devices is this thing, the Apple Watch. So I've been using the Apple Watch ever since it came out in 2015. I was really excited to see the Apple Watch being announced in 2014, and a new Apple Watch is about to launch pretty soon. So the Apple Watch Series 3 is about to launch possibly even next month. So welcome to my Leaks and Rumors series. I'm Daniel, and here's everything you need to know about the next generation Apple Watch, the Apple Watch Series 3. So yeah, enjoy, grab some popcorn first, obviously, and enjoy. Okay, so the Apple Watch Series 3. So first off, I'm not sure how many of you know it, but Apple actually has a lot of Apple Watch models. So when it comes to generations, the Apple Watch Series 3 or the Apple Watch 3 would actually be not a third, but the fourth generation Apple Watch. We first had, well, the first generation, which was actually introduced back in 2014, but released in 2015. And then we had the two new models in September 2016, so last year, when Apple introduced the Apple Watch Series 1 and the Apple Watch Series 2. And the Apple Watch Series 1 was essentially an Apple Watch S, so it was basically just spec improvements over the original Apple Watch. But the Apple Watch Series 2 was the actual new Apple Watch, since it came with 50-meter water resistance, which is just crazy. It even came with swimming workouts, and also a display that was twice as bright as the one before it, and a GPS as well. So the Series 2 was actually the first time an Apple Watch could be used outdoors without the need to take your iPhone with you. So you could go for a run without having to take your iPhone with you because it will, it had GPS, so it was trackable. Check out my in-depth review of the Apple Watch Series 2 in case you haven't seen that, and in case you want to know more about the Apple Watch Series 2. But what about the next Apple Watch, the Apple Watch Series 3? Well, design-wise, we've had quite a few rumors saying that the Apple Watch Series 3 would be getting some major design changes. I mean, the design of the Apple Watch has remained pretty much unchanged since its announcement back in 2014. Now, the Series 2 did get one design change, and that was the fact that it actually got a bit thicker. But other than that, we had no major design changes besides obviously the removal of the gold Apple Watch and the introduction of the new ceramic white Apple Watch. But those are just like color options. So the design, the body has basically remained the same except from the thickness. And John Gruber was actually one of the first to hint at a major Apple Watch redesign, which was awesome to hear because everyone pretty much wants a new Apple Watch design. However, Ming-Chi Kuo, Barclays, Bloomberg, and Digitimes Taiwan, all of them said that nope, no major design change with the Apple Watch 3. And I personally don't expect any major design changes. I mean, Apple Watch sales have actually been doing really, really good. They're actually up by 50% from last year, and Apple's now the world's largest fitness tracker seller. And usually when Apple's doing good with sales, they like to keep the design, and they want to profit from that design as much as possible. So that's pretty much why we've had the exact same iPhone design since 2014. That's why we've had the exact same iPad design mostly since 2010. And that's why the MacBooks don't really change the design that often. So 2012 and 2016, 4-year difference, 29, 2012, and then 2010 with the MacBook Air, which still hasn't been redesigned. So yeah, as you can see, Apple doesn't really like changing the design that often. So the only design change that I would say is likely to happen on the Apple Watch Series 3 would be the Apple Watch Series 3 getting thinner. Now, don't expect it to become crazy thin, like, crazy thin. The Series 2 was 0.9 millimeters thicker than the original Apple Watch, and the Series 3 might actually go back to the original thickness of 10.5 millimeters with a weight of 50 grams, I think, down from 52.4. So that's the only design change and weight change that is most likely coming to the Apple Watch Series 3, being a bit lighter and being thinner, pretty much the same as the original Apple Watch. Okay, so what about the specs of the Apple Watch Series 3? So we are definitely going to get a spec bump with the Apple Watch Series 3. So the original Apple Watch, let's just call this the Apple Watch Series 0, that one actually came with an Apple S1 processor, which was actually 520 megahertz. So yeah, and 512 megabytes of RAM, which back in 2014, this was actually a lot for a watch. Now, the Apple Watch Series 1 still came with 512 megabytes of RAM, but this one actually came with a dual-core processor, the Apple S1P. So that was an improved version of the Apple S1 processor. So it was much, much faster and snappier than the original Apple Watch. And then the Series 2 still came with 512 megabytes of RAM, but this one actually came with the Apple A2, with the Apple S2 dual-core processor, which was even faster than the S1. We don't really know the exact clocks of these processors, unfortunately, but they would most likely be somewhere between 700 to 800. I'm obviously talking about the S2. So between 700 to 800 megahertz for the S2. Now, with the Apple Watch Series 3, we're finally expecting 1 gigabytes of RAM, which would mean that you would be able to store, you would be able to have more apps open in the background. And along with that Apple S3 processor, which is still going to be a dual-core processor, but this time obviously with a higher frequency, so around 900 megahertz to 1 gigahertz most likely. I would say most likely 900. The Apple Watch Series 3 is going to get some pretty big performance improvements from the original Apple Watch and the S1. Not so much from the S2, but still, if you want to get some performance improvements and make your Apple Watch faster, this would be obviously the easiest way to do it. Just upgrade to the Apple Watch Series 3. Actually, don't do it yet. Let's take a look at all the features that the Apple Watch Series 3 is going to come with first. Okay, so far, the Apple Watch Series 3 is looking more of like an Apple Watch Series 1. So just a spec bump, essentially, from the previous generation. And when it comes to the features, here's where all the new stuff comes into place. Now, we've had quite a ton of reports from the same sources that told us that no new design is expected on the Apple Watch Series 3. So Ming-Chi Kuo, Bloomberg, DigiTimes Taiwan, and many, many more. And all of them said that the main selling feature of the Apple Watch Series 3 is actually going to be LTE support. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, what this means is that it will actually have an Apple embedded SIM. So just like the cellular models of the iPad Pros. And after you assign a carrier, which you'll be able to do from the settings, and yes, you will have to pay for cellular support from a carrier, you would be able to use your Apple Watch wherever you are for pretty much every single thing, not just for positional tracking. And that would be without the need for you to take your iPhone with you. So checking your email, checking your notifications, even making phone calls via cellular, all of this would be possible with the Apple Watch Series 3. This would be the first Apple Watch that would finally act as an independent device. Now, another cool feature, which might be coming to the Apple Watch Series 3, is an oxygen level meter. Now, some of you may not know that the Apple Watches, all of them actually do have this sensor included, by the way, an oxygen level meter, but it's not enabled, it's disabled. Now, apparently the reason for the oxygen level meter being disabled is because Apple didn't get an FCC approval in time. And they also had some disagreements with the FDA, which is a bit weird. But most likely the real reason why they've disabled it was because it wasn't accurate enough. So this might be coming back to the Apple Watch Series 3, although it's not 100% confirmed. It also might be coming to the Apple Watch Series 2 and the Apple Watch Series 1 via a future software update if this is enabled at some point. I would say no, because as I said before, the main reason why they've probably disabled it was because it wasn't accurate enough. So the hardware was the issue, not the FCC approval, which, I mean, they applied for approval in 2015, actually 2014, so now it's 2017, 3 years after, which is, yeah, they should have gotten the approval by now. So an oxygen level meter might be coming to the Apple Watch Series 3, even though this is not 100% confirmed. Now, what is 100% confirmed, however, is that Apple actually plans to switch to a glass film touchscreen from the current on-lens solution that Apple currently uses. So this was actually reported by Economic Daily News, China, and then KGI also reported something very, very similar. That Apple is actually working on micro LED displays, which might even be included on the Apple Watch Series 3. So micro LEDs would actually make the display panel much, much thinner. They would also make the display brighter and more vivid colors. And obviously much, much higher pixel densities would be possible with micro LEDs, since the pixels, the subpixels would be so small. And Apple even has a patent on how this micro LEDs would actually work. So they could essentially be arranged so that difficult sensors like the front-facing camera, the iris scanner could be positioned underneath the display. Now, in case you don't know, Apple already uses a proximity sensor and an ambilight sensor that's built into the display assembly, and the only device that this thing is being used on is the Apple Watch. So yeah, the Apple Watch already uses proximity sensor and an ambilight sensor built into the display assembly, something that not even the iPhone 8 is going to come with, which is a bit interesting. And then Apple's also working on some smart Apple Watch bands. So some of you might know that if you remove the bands on the Apple Watch, you will actually find two indentations, two rails for inserting the bands. And if you remove one of them, there's actually a proprietary port inside. Now, Apple actually uses that for diagnostics in the store, and it's also used during assembly for basically loading up the firmware. Now, that port also provides power, so a smart band would be able to directly connect to the Apple Watch and measure, for example, your oxygen level or even your heart rate externally, and possibly even way more precise than the Apple Watch sensors, especially since they would be on the inside of your hand rather than on the outside. So they would actually be more precise than the Apple Watch itself. They should be, at least. But out of all these features, LTE is definitely coming, maybe even the oxygen level meter, and maybe even the smart bands. But I wouldn't necessarily count on that. So LTE definitely coming with the Apple Watch Series 3. And Economic Daily News reported that apart from the specs improvements and the LTE improvement, the LTE support on the Apple Watch Series 3, we'll also be getting an improved battery life, which was already really good on the Apple Watch Series 2. I mean, I could actually get through like 2 full days of usage with this thing and even still have juice for the 3rd day. Obviously, if you do workouts, which I obviously don't do, then the battery won't last that long. But if you just use it as a watch and for notifications, then it can easily last you 2 to 3 days, which is amazing. And the Apple Watch Series 3 is going to be even better than this. Okay, so what about the release date? So when it comes to the release date, Economic Daily News, they've also reported that production would still be made by Quanta Computer, with some production switching to Compal Electronics, which basically means that Apple does plan on selling way more units with the Apple Watch Series 3 than they did with the Apple Watch Series 2, 1, and the original Apple Watch. Now, the actual release date is expected to be in September alongside the iPhone 8, especially since it won't be that big of a change. So that's definitely possible, since the iPhone 8 would still be the star of the show. Now, an October announcement is also likely to happen, but Apple has already updated all the iPads and even all the Macs, well, most of them. So an October event, I would say, is not that likely to happen. So what about the price? Well, the pricing would be identical to the Apple Watch Series 2. Now, the Series 2 might be dropped to Series 1 price, which at the moment is cheaper than the Series 2, or what Apple might do is remove Series 2 entirely and then just keep Series 1 and Series 3, which would make a lot more sense, since there would be way more reasons to upgrade from Series 1 to Series 3 if Series 2 is removed. Now, of course, that with the Apple Watch Series 3, you will have to pay for an LTE monthly plan. If you need LTE, obviously. I don't see Apple releasing 2 Apple Watch Series 3 models, one with LTE and one without. I don't see that happening. And finally, there's also a few new bands coming out in September as well. So a few new bands, this would mean a few new models and also a few new colors for the current models. If you take a look at the Leather Loop band, that's actually my favorite band, by the way. Did a separate video on the Leather Loop, by the way, in case you want to check it out. But if you take a look at that band, the coolest one is definitely the black model, but they stopped selling it in black. So the only one you can get right now that looks cool, I would say, is the blue one. So nope, why remove the black one? Seriously, Apple. So that one might be coming back in September, by the way. So there you go, full leaks and rumors on the Apple Watch Series 3.